Dumelang, welcome to Face the Nation. My name is Clement Manyatela. It's great to have you with us here on SABC News. On the show tonight, the Finance Minister has filed court papers responding to the DA and EFF applications over the budget issue, saying there's no better alternative to raising VAT. He also says VAT will increase come the 1st of May because his budget announcement remains in force. So where does this leave the promise the ANC made to parties that voted in support of the fiscal framework in Parliament? We'll speak to the EFF and BOSA. Also on the show, is the Ekurhuleni mayor on his way out? There's a motion of no confidence against him, seemingly by one of the parties that his party is in cooperation with. He's going to speak to us tonight. And then later, millions of people will be coming in and out of South Africa this long weekend. So how ready is the Border Management Authority to deal with the traffic? Dr. Michael Masiapato, who is the Commissioner at the Border Management Authority, joins us tonight. But first, my comment. So there is a lot that's been happening at the Sisulu University. Students have been protesting over the deplorable state of campus residence and accommodation. Violence erupted again at the university, in fact, earlier today, leading to security using rubber bullets and tear gas to disperse the crowd. Some students have been injured. We're told that others have been hospitalized. The police have now confirmed the arrest of a 54-year-old suspect in connection with the fatal shooting of a student this week. The police say that he's been charged with murder and attempted murder and will appear in court on Tuesday next week. Now, this development follows a statement by the council of the Sisulu University in which they confirmed that Sisonke Mbolekwa was a Sisulu University student, registered for the degree of Bachelor of Education in 2023 and 2024, and that owing to lack of funding, he could not yet register for 2025. But in March this year, he did pay the required minimum initial payment with the intention to register. And that's the student that was fatally shot, allegedly by a residence manager at the university. Remember, the university has previously claimed that Mbolekwa was not a student at the institution.
What we can confirm, a staff member was attacked, a shooting had happened. What we don't know is where the shooting came from, but what we know is 2 of our students were injured and were released from the hospital, and a 3rd person, who is not a student, was then succumbed to fatal of that shooting.
So that's what the university said in the beginning. Even the Minister of Higher Education also held that view.
The sad part is that the university then in their reports said he's an unregistered student. So that's what is stressing them more. They are broken, and you can see that the family cannot afford to take the funeral or the responsibilities for a befitting send-off for the child.
So the minister has now conceded that the deceased was indeed a student of the university who was last registered in 2024. But as I said earlier on, the council confirmed earlier today that this is someone who had paid an initial deposit already in March this year and was intending to register.
What I saw from the records from NSFAS, as the department, we have been paying for the student last year till the end of the year. And this year, I saw through the communication that we had with students that he is indeed registered. I can affirm that he is a student at Sisulu University.
So that is now what's transpired, which makes you wonder why the university and the Department of Health were so quick to want to make comments about the student not being registered with the university when clearly they had not checked their records properly. Because now following this council meeting and even following other meetings and evidence that was produced, the department and the institution have confirmed that this is someone, in fact, who has been a student there, has paid the deposit this year, but because there was no confirmation of where he was going to get funding from, he had paid the deposit with the intention to register. The question that we have to ask ourselves as well is, why did it take so long for the university to adequately respond to this incident? I mean, the students have complained about residences and the lack of appliances such as stoves, kettles and laundry equipment at those residences. The university's council released a statement today on how it is attending to those grievances. So that's what they have said, right, earlier today, the university council. And then you've got the university manager who fired that fatal shot. Why did he have a gun on campus? This is what the family has said, responding to just the devastation of this entire situation.
That's
the thing that hurt us the most. Them denying the child that we took to school, saying he isn't registered and being denied like an outsider. That's what made us very upset. When this thing happened, we were not prepared, so we're asking them to intervene and help in burying the child, because we are not prepared for this. We were only prepared for his schooling.
All right, so we've been telling you that the institution's council had an urgent meeting. Here's what the university has said earlier today following that council meeting.
100% of all grievances they've raised in the previous engagement with SRC, those grievances were settled, okay? And they were all met as per their own demand. The university is in a continuous project to refurbish university student accommodation. That is an ongoing. Every year we get the grant, we know every year which university resident that will be undergoing the renovations. So that is in the calendar, and the SRC is fully aware of our renovation schedule as a university.
So the question we are asking you tonight is, what do you make of how the Walter Sisulu University handled the registration status of the student who was fatally shot this week? They initially said he wasn't a student, and then had to backtrack and come back and say, oh, he was a student. There's just been so much confusion here, and makes you wonder if they didn't really have the records initially, or if they were just jumping onto defense when they initially responded to the situation. What do you make of how they responded? Share your thoughts with us. You can send a WhatsApp voice note on 078-459-1897. Remember to tell us your name and surname and where you're sending that voice note from. And please keep it at 30 seconds. Alternatively, you can send us an X on @FaceTheNation SABC. We'll be back after this. Welcome back. The VAT increase in the fiscal framework remains a bone of contention, giving the ruling party, the ANC, well, and the other parties in the GNU, an endless headache. The economic freedom fighters and Build One South Africa are moving forward with their attempts to eliminate the recent VAT increase in the 2025-2026 budget. The EFF has gone to court together with the DA. Mmusi Maimane, who's the leader of Build One South Africa, has had meetings with the ANC. He joins us now this evening, together with the EFF national spokesperson, Sinawo Thambo, who also sits in that finance committee. Mmusi and Sinawo, thanks to both of you for making time for us.
Good evening, and good evening to fellow South Africans.
Sinawo, I'll start with you, because as the EFF, you have asked the court to review and set aside that report in the fiscal framework from Parliament's Finance Committee, which led to the adoption, to its adoption by Parliament. The minister has now responded to those court papers, and he says in court papers that these are not legislations, and even if they were set aside by court, it would have no impact on the VAT increase, which was set in motion under the VAT Act by the budget announcement. What do you make of how the minister has responded to your application?
Look, thank you, Clement, and greetings to your viewers. I think that it makes a misinterpretation of the fiscal framework and revenue proposals, which include taxation within them that he presented to Parliament. Now, I think the first mistake he makes is that he speaks of the fiscal framework and revenue proposals as if they are a product of a parliamentary process. That is not the case. Fiscal framework and revenue proposals, including the taxation aspect of them, are something that were proposed by him, inclusive of his budget speech made on the 12th of March 2025. So for him to characterize them as not being legislation, that's a interpretation, because the Money Bills Amendment and Other Procedures Act also follows on the fiscal framework and revenue proposals when it speaks to the Division of Revenue Bill and the Appropriations Bill. So it shows you the foundational of legislation, that it's subsequent pieces of legislation, because the Division of Revenue and Appropriations are both referred to as bills, and bills are the first steps to something becoming adopted and subsequently becoming legislation that is binding. So his interpretation is that flawed, but at least so. But I think it's going to be important that the court clarifies whether Parliament is actually engaged in a futile exercise when it adopts the fiscal framework and revenue proposals, or amends them as according to the Money Bills Amendment Act, or not. Because if it is the case that the VAT Act as it stands as this authority, which is what he states in the court papers that he speaks to in the court against the EFF and against the DA as well, then it begs a question as to what is actually Parliament's fundamental role in terms of its acceptance or amendment of the fiscal framework and revenue proposal. And I think Part B of the application that we are intervening on also speaks to the fact that maybe it might need to be declared unconstitutional or possibly challenged in Parliament as to whether the VAT Act is something that should exist in the way that it does. But we think it's a misinterpretation, but also an opportunity to clarify the role of Parliament in amending financial pieces of legislation, and it's going to be helpful to all of us.
Yeah. Mmusi, your response to what the minister has said in his court papers today, I mean, he's basically saying there's no better alternative to raising VAT. He says VAT will increase come the 1st of May because his budget speech remains in force. In fact, just to quote him, he says, and I quote here, "Since the announcement, the decision has been widely communicated across the country and businesses alike have relied on it to plan for the year ahead. The VAT rate is therefore set to rise on the 1st of May to 15.5%, end quote. There's a promise the ANC has made to you and the other parties in the GNU that we're still engaging with the minister. He's going to consider your proposals. But you've got a minister, responding to the DA and EFF application saying, well, there's no other alternative. So where does this leave your conversation with the ANC?
Well, firstly, Clement, let me confine myself to the parliamentary process, as we're not part of the court process in this regard. But whatever the court finding were to be, it would have to give legal effect to something that Parliament itself has to do. It cannot be that court can effectively decide what the VAT rate must be in the country. The VAT rate is in fact governed by the VAT Act, which in essence empowers the minister to be able to make a pronouncement on what the VAT rate is. And I'm very conscious of the fact that if it gives him the same power to pronounce, it also gives them the same power to decide when its implementation is, whether it can be withdrawn or not. And we think that is one component of the issue that still needs to be tested. So I suspect in this instance, given the fact that we've had political engagements, we've had processes in Parliament that seek to say, here is what the expenditure cuts can look like in order to ameliorate the need for VAT, I think it would be going against the political consensus that we've taken. It would be going against the resolution that has been communicated by the people of South Africa. And certainly in all public hearings that I've been a part of as the Appropriations Committee, there's been wide rejection of VAT. And the third aspect is the parliamentary procedure process as expressed in the Money Bills and Related Matters Acts, which says that Parliament can reject, amend. And therefore, if that is the case, I would urge the minister and urge certainly in this process to say, in the spirit of collaboration, we need to see the most legally binding manner that says, given that you've got the power to table a VAT increase, you must equally so have the power through legislation to withdraw it. And that's the work that's happening now. We have a follow-up meeting certainly happening next week with all the respective parties, not as a party in the GNU, as a party outside of that, but to engage the ANC further to say, I had an engagement with you. We met with Treasury to table our proposals. The Appropriations Committee will meet on Tuesday to consider a report on the expenditure cuts. Given all this supplementary evidence, it would make no sense to continue with an increase of VAT, regardless of whether the businesses themselves have already started to communicate to their clients, because planning in today's society is fairly flexible, given that even when the repo rate changes, businesses adjust their planning accordingly. Banks notify us almost immediately once the repo rate is set. This would not be anything too onerous on the business community to be able to adjust that VAT.
Yeah, and Sinawo, we've looked at those legalities, and hopefully we'll get that constitutional clarity from the courts on where to from now. But realistically speaking, when we look at the time frames, I mean, you sit on that finance committee, you yourself also understand just the legislation and how the processes of budget have to unfold in Parliament. Do you see it happening before the 1st of May, this commitment and promise the ANC is making to these parties in and outside the GNU, that somehow before the 1st of May, there will be a miraculous reversal of this VAT hike?
Look, I think it's wishful thinking, and I would urge Comrade Mmusi to read the court papers to get the sense of the attitude of the Minister of Finance, because I think the African National Congress is speaking forked tongues when it engages with the political parties, it engages, and when the Minister of Finance makes then the court papers, or when he's interacting with the media, the Minister of Finance is under no impression that he's engaged in any process. In fact, in part of the court papers, section even says, says to him that he has given the perception that there can be a hikes, when he knows very well that that is not legislatively permissible. When the minister responds, he says that he has never given such a perception. If the EFF is under that perception that it's our own fault, he has always maintained that there will be a VAT hike of 0.5% on the 1st of May 2025, and he still maintains that. That's what he says in the court papers. So as much as other political parties might not be party to those court papers, they do by implication have an impact on everything they go around claiming that is underway currently through the negotiation process. So there's a duplicity in the negotiation process that is being engaged in with the likes of BOSA and what the Minister of Finance is stating in a sworn affidavit to the courts. And I don't think it is possible that, because I mean, after this Easter weekend, there'll be 9 days left. I don't see logic possible for there to be a reversal of the VAT hikes, and there's no intention to do so by the Minister of Finance, in my view.
Yeah. And Mmusi, do you not think that there are two processes unfolding here? On one hand, and I get what you said earlier about how if they go ahead with this, then that goes against the spirit of what has been discussed in the meetings. But I mean, it's got to surprise you that you have been given a commitment that the finance minister is going to consider your proposals as parties. In fact, when he was speaking to the media already yesterday, he was suggesting that he has not really even seen some of the proposals by some of the parties. So when you hear him say that, you see what he says in court papers today, in that, well, there's really no other alternative. That really questions the conversation that ANC has with you, because clearly, according to the finance minister, there's just no other alternative, and that's the man that got to be convinced to find additional revenue.
Well, the first starting point is that, and naturally, and I respect the ANC's processes in this, is that you cannot negotiate with the Minister of Finance in this regard. I have to negotiate with the party political process, because at the end of the day, if the Minister of Finance believes himself or that office or Treasury to be an independent island, independent of parliamentary processes, well, the consequences could be severe, because here's the dilemma that they will face. Any bill there are multiple bills here that need to be tabled, of which one of them is the Division of Revenue Bill. The second is the Appropriation Bill, which still have to be voted on. And therefore, if then you undermine that entire political process, well, you'll have to also demonstrate where you are garnered the necessary votes to get all those pieces of legislation. The third piece of legislation is the Taxation Amendment Law Bill, which is still coming to before Parliament. So if the minister wants to act against the political process, he must be conscious that at the end of the day, it is Parliament and the National Council of Provinces, given that these are money bills, that eventually have to pass these pieces of legislation so that the president can sign them into law. So you can act in one way and say, well, you are stuck to your guns, you'll act in this manner. But the harsh reality of it, and that's the promise we have made to the people of South Africa, is that if the minister feels he wants to act against that authority of Parliament, then you'll end up with bills that cannot be passed legislatively, which will create a different crisis. And the last point I want to make is that this is not only the end point of this issue, because part of the reason why we're facing the dilemma of a VAT hike is because we've got a growth problem. So half of these issues require an amendment in how we manage our economy so that it can grow, that it alleviates the need for many of these. And I think that if you are to stumble at this earlier point, you are going to struggle with many other adjustments that are required, so that we don't in the long run believe that the only way to raise revenue is through taxation of people, because ultimately you are going to harm not only the economy, but harm fiscal sustainability.
So now, in terms of that court process, when are you hoping to get the outcome? Because time is running out before the 1st of May, or what are you looking at? What timelines are you looking at?
Look, the matter is set to be heard on the 22nd of April, which is before the 1st of May. Yeah. And of course, the principle of the relief that we're seeking is that the process must return to the Standing Committee on Finance so that there can be a meaningful deliberation on whether we accept or amend the fiscal framework and revenue proposals, because we still believe that procedurally the process was not followed in terms of the Money Bills and other related Amendment Procedures Act of 2009. So once that process is restarted, and which we are confident is going to occur, hopefully then the political parties which we think have been manipulated by the African National Congress to think that there's a feasibility of reversing the VAT hike within 30 days, which they supported in the fiscal framework, will come to an appreciation that the ANC did not engage with them in good faith. And I have all of the belief and confidence that the likes of BOSA and Action SA and Rise Mzansi were well-meaning in their support of the fiscal framework and revenue proposals, considering a 30-day reversal. But that well-meaningness doesn't mean that there's a legislative permissibility for that to occur. And hopefully, if the courts rule in our favor, then we can engage on a process where we actually have leverage of a fiscal framework and revenue proposal to ensure that the minister, if he does have the powers that Comrade Mmusi thinks he might have to reverse the hike the same way he declared it in terms of that act, then there might be some leverage in terms of there is a fiscal framework that is not being supported, because I can see now that the approach is that there's going to be a holding hostage of the Division of Revenue Bill and the Appropriations Bill if the principal spirit that they agreed upon is betrayed. This could have been avoided, and we could have done this while we had the opportunity, according to the Money Bills Act, to amend the fiscal framework and revenue proposals and give the minister the 48 hours that is permissible by that act to review the amendments that we propose, rather than the non-binding recommendations that were sent through and voted on in the National Assembly. So hopefully, if the courts rule in our favor on the 22nd of April, or whatever date they deem to do so, if it is before the 1st of May, we'll be able as political parties to sit down and have a meaningful conversation as to how we interact with the Minister of Finance and the African National Congress, which I think should not be separated. They are one and the same. And I think there's a duplicitous interaction happening with political parties. When we met the ANC last Friday, we made it very clear to the public and to them as well that we're under no illusion that there's a possibility of reversing the VAT hike within these 30 days. We presented our proposals, the same ones which we did in the Standing Committee of Finance, the same ones which we sent to the Minister of Finance via email correspondence as well, because we thought they didn't reflect in the report that was finally adopted in the National Assembly. But we're not under any illusion that this is reversible. And I think that we must all come to that appreciation. But wishful thinking can remain that. And we hope that, look, it's in our interest as the EFF as well that the VAT hike is reversed if it's possible. So we don't wish to be right in this instance. It's just that we said we are.
Yeah. Mmusi, as you meet with the ANC next week, what clarity are you looking for? Because they're saying one thing, unless they somehow still think that they can still convince the finance minister. But as I said, if you've looked at those court papers, you can see clearly that this is a man who has made his decision.
Well, in the same manner that the Minister of Finance said the VAT idea was his independently, he must then be able to convince the whole of Parliament that he can carry it on his own. And our view is that that is in fact not possible because it requires the votes. I think ultimately this is where we need to assert the supremacy of Parliament. Because even whatever the court's decision is going to be, a court, as I've argued, cannot determine what the VAT rate must be. I think the idea that, and we cannot mislead the public into believing that a judge will say, no, it's not going to be 15.5, it's going to be 15, or whatever the case might be, which is not what the case can be. So therefore, we must assert the supremacy of Parliament. We must go back to a place where we say Parliament has made these recommendations, whether it be on the fiscal framework, whether it be on whatever bill, so that we can achieve a budget that reflects the will and the interest of the people. And there have been significant submissions. I have been looking and will continue to do so at the report that the Appropriations Committee will go on. And equally so, the expression remains consistent that citizens are opposed to this issue, but they are equally so seeing expenditure cuts that are necessary. Therefore, once we've taken through that process, the Money Bills and Related Matters Act focuses on expenditure in the same way as the fiscal framework focuses even on the revenue and the macroeconomic climate. So we must deal with these laws separately and know that once we can deal with the expenditure cycle, there should genuinely be no need for an increase of 0.5% or ultimately the attainment of this 20 odd billion that we seem to be debating in a 2.1 trillion division of revenue bill.
All right, Sinawo Thambo and Mmusi Maimane, thanks to both of you for joining us for this conversation, responding to now these latest court papers by the Minister of Finance, who's clearly saying that I just don't have any alternative. And yes, the ANC continues to promise the other parties that it's still somehow possible for the finance minister to be convinced to find additional revenue somewhere. But the reality is the minister himself says there's no other alternative. And if I had any other alternative, I would have presented it already. So this meeting between Mmusi Maimane and the ANC and other parties next week is going to be interesting. We'll be back after the break. Stay with us here on Face the Nation. Welcome back. The question we've been asking you tonight is whether you think the Walter Sisulu University has responded appropriately to what's been happening there. What do you make of how that institution has handled the registration status of the student who was fatally shot this week? We've got some voice notes that have come through. All right, before that voice notes, let's start with the tweets. Mlungisi says, the Walter Sisulu University was supposed to check the registration status of the student before they can publicly issue an inaccurate statement. It's very disappointing, if you ask me. Bono says the university tried to hide their shenanigans by saying he isn't their student. It is very devastating that the student had to lose his life in that fashion. Condolences to the family. Rabotata says the university must be criminally charged for the death of the student. As parents, we send our children for learning and not to be butchered. Shame on Walter Sisulu University. Yeah, and of course the University Council held an urgent meeting earlier today, and they came out also confirming that this is a student someone who was a student at the university even in 2024, and this is a student who had also paid a deposit this year in March and was intending to register. So this wasn't a stranger to the university, to the Walter Sisulu University. So again, raises questions around why the university responded in the manner that they did, claiming that this man was not a student there. Let's take a listen to some of the WhatsApp voice notes that have come through.
Good evening, Clement. This is my daughter from Mpumalanga. The manner in which the university has handled the registration status of the late student is very disheartening and embarrassing. In fact, it raises more questions than answers. I wonder who the university was actually trying to protect through disputing the student registration. From my view, the university VC and other campus management team should be suspended with immediate effect and without pay until the law enforcement agencies have concluded this investigation.
Good evening, Clement. This is Ntobeko in Umthwalum. Well, I think the university failed to handle this thing professionally. They should have come out and be honest and tell us what was going on. Now they are seemingly being caught in that they lied. They lied, so it's clear that something was being hidden. So they need to explain what they were hiding and why they were hiding it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for all your tweets and your WhatsApp voice notes as well. Let's move to this now. The Border Management Authority has increased security control measures at the Libombo port of entry ahead of the Easter holidays. The law enforcement service has also deployed additional technological support using drones and body cameras to monitor traveler movements. The Commissioner of the Border Management Authority is Dr. Masiapato, who joins us now live from the Libombo border post. Thank you so much for making time for us, Dr. Masiapato. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you very much, Clement, for the opportunity.
Let's start with the situation at the Libombo border post where you are. What is the current flow of traffic and are you ready to deal with it?
Yeah, no, yes, indeed, Clement. This is the second day of our operations. We effectively started yesterday. So on that basis, we can indicate that everything is going according to plan. And indeed, we are very much ready to be able to deal with all of the traffic. So since this morning, we can confirm, Clement, that we have been able to process around 11,000 travelers. Around 6,000 of those were exiting South Africa to the Mozambican side, and around 5,000 of those were entering South Africa. But some of those, obviously, when they entered South Africa, they also traveled back. It was people who were coming to Komatipoort to buy some groceries for Good Friday. So on that basis, we can say that things are going very well. But there hasn't been the highest volume that we had actually expected. However, the colleagues are hard at work as we speak now. We are expecting that when we get to around 10 o'clock or so, or 200 hours in the night, there will still be more people coming through into the port.
Obviously, a lot of, from what we've seen in the past, a lot of illegal activities tend to occur during this time. Have you made any arrests? Is there anything you've picked up?
Yeah, no. You see, in terms of the activities that are unfolding, Clement, we can indicate that the activities that we are doing actually includes high levels of security. Hence, you have actually spoken about the issue of the drones. We are actually deploying the drones on the sky, and we are able to see all of the activities that are unfolding on the ground. And we are able to activate the border guards on the ground to be able to do the interceptions and effectively deal with all of the challenges we are dealing with. Just maybe as an example, Clement, we have been just today been able to intercept around 38 individuals who are trying to enter or exit the country illegally. And those people were then intercepted and brought through into the port. Yesterday, we had around 36 that we have intercepted. So all in all, it comes to around 74 people that we have intercepted. So on that instance, we can indicate that around 4 of those were facilitators. And we did not deport facilitators, but we took them to Komatipoort police station.
One of the things that we tend to witness during this time is just illegal people who either come into the country or those who actually go home. We've spoken about this the last time you were here, about our immigration system, including our capacity to enforce border control and management, and how that has been weak at best. Are you making any meaningful strides? Because there are sometimes people who are here illegally, and for some reason, during Easter or during any other holiday season, somehow they still find a way to get home for the holiday season and still make it back into the country while they are illegal.
Yeah, you see, Clement, that has been the case, for all this while, if we are to look at the historical experience, as it were. And I think one of the issues that we can fairly agree on that particular basis has been the fact that we did not have, this technology that we currently have. So what we basically do now, Clement, we deploy these drones along the vulnerable segments. The people I'm talking about that we have intercepted, which is around 74, these were the people that had been trying to leave the country illegally. And of course, some of them wanted to come through into the country illegally. We then arrested them and we had to process them. So when it comes to that particular aspect, that is exactly what used to happen previously, because we could not be able to have the eyes on the vulnerable segments, all of them. But now we actually deploy the border guards in a targeted manner through which we are then able to engage and be able to intercept them. Because, by the way, the technology we have on the body cams versus the actual drones, they are able to communicate and therefore even give geolocation to demonstrate where the individuals are, and we're able to send the border guards directly to those particular areas. So we can actually say, Clement, that as we continue to do this work, we can be assessed at a later stage in terms of the ability to be able to intercept those and be able to demonstrate that things are now done differently.
So corruption also remains quite a big issue at our borders. Is your zero tolerance policy towards any form of corruption or unethical conduct, filtering through to the officials on the ground? Because it's all great and well to have the technology. It's great to have enough officers even at the border. But if some of them are going to be amenable and easily corruptible, then that still corrupts the entire system.
Yeah, no, indeed, Clement, that is one of the biggest challenges that we had always been having when it comes to the issue of corruption. Now, if you look at the intervention that we have made, particularly on the issues of the body cams, one of the key issues that the body cams are doing, Clement, is to be able to enable us in the control room, in the control center, to be able to hear every interaction that our officials have with the travelers. Remember, the body cam actually, it is a device that has a multiplicity of functions. Amongst those is the ability to send audio as well as visual back to the control room. So to that extent, all of the officials, as they interact with the travelers, we are able to hear their conversation. That already assists us to be able to pick up any instance of anybody who would want to do any kind of a nefarious activity. That's the first part. The second part, Clement, you will be aware that we did sign an agreement together with the Special Investigative Unit in what we call, or we created what is called Border Management and Immigration Anti-Corruption Forum. And we can confirm that during yesterday, if you saw some of the conversations that we have had, the Special Investigative Unit team has been on the ground here at Lebombo, and they're also even in other areas. What we are seeking to do with them is to develop mechanisms on the basis of creating awareness, but also doing some preventative actions to make sure that our officials don't necessarily get that vulnerable in the space. The last thing that I can indicate, Clement, which is very much fundamental, we have started to do this work a bit differently. And what that means is we now ensure that the port of entry remains sanitized, to the extent that we don't allow anybody in the port who is not a traveler, which effectively means that all the people that enter the port are already people that get assessed at the gate for them to enter the port to be processed. So on that basis, the people who appear before the immigration officers are already people with requisite documents who are supposed to be travelers legitimately so. So on that basis, there wouldn't be any need for any of those travelers to pay any immigration officer any money. So these are some of the interventions, Clement, that we have started to put on the table to be able to deal with issues of corruption.
And what about the Beit Bridge border post? Because I know you're at Lebombo now, but I know Beit Bridge often is identified as another notorious and troublesome one. What are your officials telling you about the activity and traffic there?
Yeah, so indeed, Clement, Beitbridge is one of the top ports, the top land ports, because it is our key corridor out of the country into Zimbabwe and ultimately into the continent. So on that basis, we have deployed the Deputy Commissioner for Corporate Services, Madam Jane Tupana. She is there, and the colleagues are doing work on the ground. So I did have a conversation just 10, 15 minutes ago, just to understand how things had gone that side. So indeed, everything is going well. There has been some coverage, even by your colleagues that side, in terms of the activities that are taking place that side. The only thing that is interesting, by the way, Clement, in terms of the activities, especially the experience of yesterday, we had a lot of preparations for the exit, as it were. But what then became interesting is we then had more entry than exit, even yesterday. And today things started to stabilize, almost to equalize. And the reason for that is because the ZCC other team had actually opened the church full-time this year in 5 years, as it has been reported. So on that basis, there had been a lot of buses that came from the continent coming through into the country with the intention of going to Polokwane for the purposes of the ZCC pilgrimage. So effectively, I can say that everything is going very well. The only place, Clement, where we had some bit of a challenge is in Grobelaar's Bridge, port of entry on the N11 going into Botswana. The reason we had a challenge there is because we had the extended operating hours there to 24 hours. And because of that, we had to assemble a team to handle the shift from midnight into 6 this morning. And there was a bit of a lag. But otherwise, we've been able to correct that. Everything is going according to plan. All right, Dr. Masiapato, thanks for making time for us. He's the Commissioner at the Border Management Authority. After the break, we'll be in conversation with the Mayor of Ekurhuleni. Stay with us. Welcome back. Ekurhuleni Mayor Nkosindiphile Xakaza faces an uncertain future ahead of a motion of no confidence sparked by a reported 2 billion rand revenue shortfall stemming from billing errors impacting business customers in the metro. During his State of the City address, Xakaza vowed to take action against city officials allegedly involved in assisting businesses owing municipal electricity rates. The Mayor joins us now in studio. Mayor, thank you so much for making time. Good evening.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I want to greet the viewers at home.
Let's start with this issue around the billing crisis and some officials somehow assisting businesses. What's going on?
Maybe just before I go there, Clement, I think it is important that I communicate to our communities in Ekurhuleni that we, just last week we closed, we're now exactly a year in office, and we have recently delivered our second State of the City's address, where we're giving an account what has actually happened since our election around this time last year. And a story that we can summarize into 2 phases. The first phase was, of course, to stabilize the council, to look at coalition and say, how do we manage better the coalition and set up systems for service delivery, put up war room, and ensure that we do communicate to our communities. And the second phase, we did touch briefly on the economy, the investment conference, very exciting, some of the pledges that we've actually received. And the last phase, we've been focusing on building capacity, internal capacity, ensuring that we deal with over-reliance on what you call overtime. You've seen some of the protest, people that are not happy with some of the measures that were put in place, over-reliance on contracted services. But importantly, that we also instill discipline and consequences. And that is why the issue of the 2 billion losses, which our report says it is as a result of mismanagement. And when there's mismanagement, there must be consequences. And we're happy that today we've been able to go to council. We followed all the regulations, and council have given us the decision to actually effect consequences, including suspension of some of the senior management. So we think we've got a great story to tell. But of course, the beneficiaries of the rot, those who benefited from all the inefficiencies and so forth, they will not go down without a fight. So we have to push hard. So they show themselves, you know, in the manner in which some of our employees behave. You've seen some of them closing the roads and so forth, being mobilized, and you've seen politicians backing them up. I mean, how do you go back up people who march and threaten the economy on the basis of an overtime? I'm just saying, those are some of the theatrics that we've actually seen.
Okay.
But we remain focused. We think we're on track, and our communities, they actually see the light at the end of the tunnel. Yeah.
Okay, so back to my question though about this billing situation. Who are these senior managers that are somehow assisting businesses in Ekurhuleni?
Well, we've taken a report to council on the 27th of February, where you know the investigation that was led by the MMC of Finance pointed to the system that was shifted. You know, energy, I mean, billing is electricity billing is a responsibility of the electricity department. But in 2023, a year before I took over, that system was actually changed, moved away from energy, put to ICT, probably part of innovation. You'll agree with me, I mean, there's nothing wrong with being innovative. But if the systems that we are putting up results in tampering, in manipulation, to an extent that we get so many material losses, you'll agree with me that ought to be consequences. So we've taken a report. It is still an internal a process, because precautionary suspension, it means the process is not yet concluded, because to suspend a senior manager, it's highly regulated. It actually takes a lot of time. Yeah. But we have done that. We're happy that we will be reporting to council that process has actually been concluded. Yeah.
Okay, so part of the phase one that you mentioned was to stabilize the council, to make sure that there's some level of stability. There has been stability, but now we're hearing of this motion of no confidence, and it's coming from one of your coalition partners. Who is it coming from?
We did indicate that this motion of no confidence, we view it as frivolous, that it is baseless, because one of the things that has been cited is a 2 billion shortfall that we're acting on. Why would you, when we've brought in a report, when we're telling you even now, some of the officials, there's actually consequences. It's one-man party. We think it's got a lot of personal issues than really, issues that are political in their nature. We are engaging, with other coalition parties, because you'll agree with me, coalitions are difficult, for it's a new phenomenon, and we are trying to navigate through it. People, they come with personal issues, they want to put them on the table. If those issues are not considered, they actually venture to, some of this frivolous motion. And we think it is nothing else but, one of those theatrics. They show themselves in many different colors.
Where does this leave this coalition? And also, to be clear to our viewers, we're talking here about the EFF?
Well, the people who've put a motion, we are in a coalition on a collaborative arrangement with the EFF, but we also have what we call a Super 7. It means it's 7 other smaller parties. Yeah. So one of the party within, the Super 7 called ICM, they've actually put a motion.
So it's not the EFF that's put that motion?
Well, it's not the EFF. They've also lobbied one other two-man party, the ACDP, which is outside of the coalition arrangement. But of course, they rely on the dynamics. What is the position of the EFF? How do we relate? They also rely on the DA. What are the dynamics? How do we relate? To the DA? And I must say that since we removed, Dunga, who is a leader of the EFF in the province. And I don't want to attribute the EFF, because coalitions are managed at the level of the province and national. But Dunga has been, portraying himself in a very rogue way. And I can simplify it to say, really, because it's not consistent to establish processes. We've set up a joint political management committee, which has been embraced by the provincial leadership, including the senior leadership of the EFF. But he continues to really portray himself outside of that established platform. And I don't want to be really personal with him, and I think he must recover because we had to effect consequences on him because of lack of performance, lack of discipline, and I think he must give council a chance so that we can lead and discharge services.
What about you do have MMCs from the EFF in your administration, right? Yep. Are you satisfied with them, with their performance?
Well, we've done a performance. We've actually expressed ourselves in certain areas. This is what we've done also to the councillors of the ANC. But we think the leadership remains, that the individualism of Dunga crops up in terms of how these councillors are behaving. We're in the State of the City's address. The councillors were actually compelled, these individual MMCs, to actually protest, engage in a protest, against the same State of the City's address they are part of.
But are you satisfied with their performance?
Well, we've raised some of the issues there before the leadership to actually...
What do you mean by issues? Lack of performance?
Well, I mean, what do you say if councillors they are part of the executive, they do a protest in a council meeting? You can imagine what happens in a mayoral committee. We can imagine when I say go and attend to a particular service delivery outage. If in a council meeting there is that type of a demonstration. So these are some of the complex issues that we have to navigate. We continue to escalate to the leadership to say, look at some of these attributes and ensure that you assist us to manage them. Yeah.
All right. Ekurhuleni Mayor, thank you so much for making time for us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
And thanks to you for watching the Thursday edition of Face the Nation. We'll be back with you next week, Tuesday at 8 p.m. Have a good evening. Cheers.